capacity in as far as making our ports more efficient and effective. Rough seas resulted in cargo vessels losing containers overload and others being extensively damaged. Now, the port of Cape Town has been the country's second largest container terminal, and in the wake of what's been happening in the northern part of our continent, in the Suez Canal and all that, many countries and companies have been redirecting their cargo or their vessels right down the Cape. And this weather impact has been quite negative for us. And although Cape Town handles a variety of cargo, the biggest exports from the port are agricultural products, as you know. Having perishable agricultural products stuck in the port or in transit for an extended period results in losses for exporters. This in turn impacts on the agricultural sector in our country, and given its impact on our economy, there is a knock-on effect on the economy as a whole. This is just one illustration of the fact that climate change is as much an economic issue as it is a scientific, a social justice, a human rights, and a developmental issue. It has a direct and material impact on the activity across our economy and affects lives and affects businesses. Disruptions caused by climate change increase the cost of doing business, undermines competitiveness, and also dampens our prospects for increased employment. These disruptions result in lower tax revenue, of course, and increased expenditure on disaster relief. Also on healthcare, as people who are injured have to be taken care of from a health point of view, and also the social support for affected communities, and this is where it matters most also. These extreme weather conditions cause damage to infrastructure like roads and bridges, and railways and power lines and ports. But they also cause enormous damage to homes, devastation in homes, and particularly in vulnerable communities where their homes are made out of tin, cardboard, and very, very flimsy material. And this is where we feel, and our people feel the effect much more acutely. The resulting strain on public finances then necessitates the reallocation of funds from other essential services. To manage the higher expenditure and lower revenues, government may then need to increase borrowing, find ways of finding more money, and this in many ways leads to higher debt levels and interest payments. This limits government's ability to invest in other critical areas. And you can already see the impact of climate change that we have to deal with it, which we must. The National Treasury, therefore, is central to our response to both the shocks of climate change and the potential opportunities. The U.S. government as a spirit, as an enabler, to build a more inclusive, resilient, and sustainable economy. And I do want to commend Minister of Finance and Deputy Minister of Finance and indeed the National Treasury team for convening this symposium, together with the Presidential Climate Commission and other partners, and also the brand new Minister of Electricity and Energy in his reconfigured portfolio, so that he can become more authoritative himself.
Can you go to the...
So this symposium will focus on the integration of climate goals, macro, fiscal, and finance policy and mainstreaming climate change considerations into governmental fiscal system. It is society's most vulnerable embedded ground of climate change because as ordinary people, we usually have very limited resources and we often live very close to the brink of their own financial capability. Who suffer the most because they have limited means to prepare for, they have limited means to cope with, and to recover from climate-related adverse effects. And you can imagine in your mind a family whose home is damaged, who, as they look at how the floods have an impact on their home or in their community, see the entire furniture of the home just being washed down the floods, playing on the flooded river, and it basically means all their possessions are gone. So they are the ones who are most affected. Not saying that businesses are not affected, but we need to look at this through the prism just of ordinary people as well. Just as it is the countries of the global south that feel the effects of climate change most, despite being least responsible historically for global emissions. It is critical that we strengthen systems for adaptation and mitigation and build resilience in communities and accelerate our decarbonization effects and the pace of the just energy transition. The reality that we must confront is that the carbon intensity of our own economy is not sustainable. For decades, our reliance on fossil fuels as a source of energy was in many ways a competitive advantage because it allowed us to produce electricity cheaply, and it also allowed us to industrialize at a very, very fast pace. But the world has changed, and this dependency has come to pose significant risks for us. As the world moves towards greener economies, our trading partners will take measures to ensure that their own climate actions do not undermine their economies. Instruments like the European Union's Carbon Border Adjustment Mechanism, which has the potential to cause great damage to developing country economies, signal the inevitability of carbon pricing in global trading systems. Our emissions-intensive energy system is likely to increasingly undermine our competitiveness in global markets. I have repeatedly said that South Africa will decarbonize at a pace, at a scale that is affordable to our economy and also affordable to our society. If we act fast, or act too fast, and fast we must act, but if we act too fast, we risk damaging huge sections of our economy before we have built alternative energy and industrial capabilities. At the same time, not acting now risks our economic stability. So we must act, and we need to act fast, but we need to take into account our own capability of doing so. We must embrace a managed transition to a low-carbon economy, not only to safeguard our people and our environment, but to ensure our own economic resilience and growth. We are, in reality, facing a climate challenge of emergency proportions. Indecision and slow action are not an option for us. We must act decisively and swiftly to mitigate the effects of climate change and ensure that we do have a just transition for all South Africans. We must pursue a green industrial agenda that will create jobs and grow the economy. But in doing so, we must be wise, we must open our minds and our eyes to the many opportunities that are given rise by this green transition. Investments in green infrastructure, renewable energy, and climate adaptation measures can be costly, and they can require, and they do require rather, careful financial planning and prioritization. That is why we have prioritized inclusive growth. We are hard at work implementing the urgent reforms that are needed to lift growth, economic growth that is, and to pursue a fiscal strategy that protects the sustainability of our public finances. Operation Vulindlela has been an extremely successful partnership between the National Treasury and the Presidency, and a wide range of government departments. And this is where we have seen the intergovernment work at its best, where we have succeeded in breaking down silos that are always inherent in government, and where working together we have been able to achieve a great deal. This project has enabled significant reforms in areas such as energy, and we continue to see the progress that has been made as a result of the initiatives that we have taken together in water, in telecommunications, and now in transport, making our economy more competitive and increasing our productive capacity. And what we have been doing in Operation Vulindlela has been widely welcomed by everyone. Our strategy involves preparing ourselves to withstand the economic risks that are posed by climate change while taking full advantage of the opportunities that are given rise to by the energy transition. And this is no easy balance. South Africa aims to reach net zero emissions by 2050. Our revised nationally determined contribution balances our developmental needs and economic realities. It takes into account the feasibility of undertaking a climate response through a set of just transition pathways. Importantly, it notes carbon tax as a vital component of our mitigation strategy to lower greenhouse gas emissions. By internalizing the cost of carbon emissions, the carbon tax incentivizes companies to reduce their own carbon footprint and invest in cleaner technologies. And it is pleasing that a number of companies are taking this up to good effect. Carbon tax also generates revenue for climate initiatives that we embark upon. These funds can be reinvested in renewable energy projects, energy efficiency programs, and social support mechanisms that we need to put in place as part of the climate transition, a just transition. We have launched a number of other initiatives to meet our emissions targets. The Renewable Energy Independent Power Producer Procurement Program has been a great success, attracting over 209 billion rand in investment and adding much needed capacity to our electricity grid. The Integrated Resource Plan which outlines our country's energy mix, is in the process of being updated. And I'm glad and pleased to know that discussions are going on around this IRP, and I'm hoping that we can finalize it. And as a government, we're very proud of processes that we involve ourselves in and involve our people in through their various organizations, that we are able to put either a policy out there and have it thoroughly discussed, whereafter we then find a solution that incorporates the wisdom that will come out of the consultation process. And that is what the IRP process is. It sets out a viable energy mix over the medium and long term to achieve our decarbonization objectives. The Just Energy Transition Investment Plan sets out a quantified investment plan of some $98 billion. I did a quick calculation as that's coming, and with the exchange rate movement, it seems to amount to 1.7 trillion rand investment. And now this will drive huge investments in the electricity grid, in green hydrogen, in electric vehicles, economic diversification, skills development, and many others, including the social aspect, so that the just transition that we're talking about must have real meaning to the people of our country, so that no one is left behind. We continue to explore opportunities to meet our emissions reduction targets in minerals extraction, in green hydrogen production, in new power infrastructure, in vehicles that are driven by electricity, that is electric vehicles, in manufacturing and economic infrastructure upgrades. It is crucial that the transition to a low carbon economy is in the end just and inclusive, and that no worker and no community should feel that it's left behind. And this may well be a contested area. And contested it must be. And this is where we do need to take care that we consult people, we consult workers, and we consult communities, particularly in areas that are in energy generation precincts, so that as we migrate to just transition, they must see that it is indeed just. And our process must not be theoretical or just technical. It must be real. And ordinary people must feel that they are included and they are part of the whole. And of course, you have a wonderful disease in South Africa. And that disease is that people want to be consulted. It's a wonderful disease. It must be consulted. People no longer want to be taken for granted. No longer want to have things done for them without them being involved. And it is in climate change interventions that the group needs to be extremely careful and be patient and hold thousands and thousands of meetings with ordinary people, talking to them, so that they too feel that they are part of the solution. And this is the South African way. The growth of clean tech, renewable energy, battery storage, green hydrogen, and minerals for future low-carbon economy must result in opportunities for affected sectors for affected workers, and for affected communities. We are investing in retraining programs, creating new job opportunities in renewable energy, and supporting small enterprises in affected areas. And these efforts must also be taken up with transparency, directness, and honesty, so that those who are players in the small and medium enterprise sector must have a sense that they too are going to get opportunities which will enable them to support their livelihoods, but also to contribute to economic growth. Climate finance is crucial for our transition. We need substantial investment to build sustainable infrastructure, develop green technologies, and support social programs. One looks, for example, at the issue of disaster funding, where there is a substantial gap between available disaster funds and the cost of disaster response. Even as we have taken proactive measures, like setting up a climate change response fund, we need to think seriously about the urgent financial and policy measures that are needed to address these shocks, and how to strengthen the National Treasury's disaster financing response. The Department of Forestry, Fisheries and the Environment is already working with the Presidential Climate Commission on recommendations for climate change response fund and an adaptation and resilience investment plan to accompany it. Mitigation and adaptation financing is a challenge, and we call on our international partners to fulfill their commitment to finance both. They often stand at great platforms in the world, and they make pronouncements of commitments. And we in the global south, who suffer the most from the effects of climate change, most of which originates from those developed economies that caused a greater part of the climate change that they're suffering. But they never fulfill and follow up on their commitments. And when they do so either late, and they do so in very complicated measures. And we therefore call upon them to live up to the commitments that they continue to make. We have already seen the positive steps with the establishment of the Green Climate Fund, Loss and Damage Fund, and other global mechanisms. So we're seeing some progress, but we want to see faster progress. However, we need more innovative financing solutions that mobilize private capital and incentivize sustainable practices. The National Treasury's climate finance strategy is pivotal in this regard, outlining how we can leverage public and private finance to achieve our climate goals. We must not underestimate the importance of our own domestic capital and financial markets to innovatively mobilize and deploy capital towards our just transition. In fact, we invite our own local market to be responsive and to be innovative. The Just Transition Energy Transition Funding Platform will be launched in the next few months. It will be an important precursor to a broader just transition financing mechanism, proposals for which are being developed by the Presidential Climate Commission. We call on South African business to invest in the projects that are needed for a successful just transition in this country. And I call upon them even more so now that We've now arrived at a new era for our country, an era of great confidence, an era where many South Africans are seeing great potential for our country moving forward with the establishment of the Government of National Unity. If ever there was a time to invest much more positively and confidently, this is the time. We need to use blended finance to unlock private sector flows. International development finance institutions and governments of the global north that made financial pledges under the Paris Agreement and COP26 are important sources of cheap and concessional capital. To access this and other funding, we need a credible project pipeline. We need to work with all sectors of government, with communities and with business as well, to create new manufacturing, mining, agriculture, and service opportunities for our country and our people. The science of climate change is complex. So too are the economic, technological, the social, ecological, and political implications of all this. Nonetheless, climate action is an imperative. And it is an imperative because it is all out there for us to see that we've got to act, and we must act now. This requires collaborative efforts between government, business, communities, labor, civil society, and indeed our international partners. If we work together, if we understand the risks, and if we appreciate the urgency, we can make our country truly climate resilient. And in doing so, we can build a sustainable future for generations to come. We have been able in the past to overcome many challenges. And this is one more challenge that we can overcome as South Africans. So I'm really delighted that people who've been brought together here are what I would call the brains trust. The brains trust of being able to deal with the climate change challenge that we face. And I hope that you'll be able to make your inputs and your contributions with great courage and with great wisdom. So I look forward to the wisdom that you are going to impart to everyone else within this process. As I look at all of you, I see great wisdom in your eyes. It's not the same that and I see dumb people. So sitting here are really clever people, and I look forward to hearing what you're going to say. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. The President does have a hard stop. Please join me. However, we'd like to just capture one picture very quickly. So if I call your name, please quickly make your way to stage before his hard stop. So the entire ExCo of National Treasury, the two gentlemen behind me, please join me in front. Mr. Lungisafu Zile, Ms. Satu Kakone, and Dr. Crispian Onka. Can you please welcome them as they come to stage? Yes, please, can I ask Mr. Christopher if he does have a hard stop? So we have only a few seconds to get this done.
Cell phone. Arjun. Cell phone. Cell phone.
If I please could ask that we all be in our seats and upstanding as the President makes his way up the stage. Please do not move from your seats at all. You won't have an opportunity for any meet and greet. He is rushing to another meeting. So if we could please all remain in our seats as he makes his way out, and then I'll explain the rest of the program. Now, for the vote of thanks, we will be hearing from Dr. David Masondo. He is the Deputy Minister of Finance for the Republic of South Africa. Please, a round of applause as he makes his way to stage.
Can you hear me with that?
Yes.
See, I was in Arabic tones and I said Amanda to test His Excellency President Ramaphosa, in absentia, the U.S. Ambassador to South Africa, His Excellency Mr. Piketty, the British High Commissioner, His Excellency Anthony Philipson, the French Ambassador to South Africa, His Excellency David Martinon, Mr. Marino Cunat from the Embassy of Switzerland to South Africa, Deputy Ambassador, European Union, Mr. Fulgencio Carrito Lutz, Head of Cooperation, from the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany, Mr. Fabian Kiriai Nice. Got it right. The Director of UN Economic Commission for Africa, Southern Africa Office, Ms. Eunice Kamwendo, the Resident Coordinator in South Africa, UN Economic Commission for Africa, Mr. Nelson Muff, Director of the World Bank Group, Ms. Satu Kam Konek, the Head of the United States Agency for International Development, Southern Africa Mission Director, Ms. Leslie Marbury, the President of Business Unity South Africa, Mr. Mkolisi Ngonjo, the President of the South African Local Government Association, Councillor Stofile, the Honorable Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Ramokgopa, Deputy Ministers and other ministers, the Director General of the National Dr. Duncan Petersen, other senior government officials, commissioners from the Presidential Climate Commission of South Africa, distinguished dignitaries, distinguished guests, and participants. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the National Treasury Climate Resilience Symposium. This symposium marks a significant milestone in our collective journey towards addressing the urgent climate challenges facing South Africa and the world at large. Allow me to convey the apology of our Finance Minister, Ino Kodongwane, for his inability to be with us today because he had to join the Parliamentary Standing Committee on Finance in Cape Town. However, he is here with us in spirit. His Excellency President Ramaphosa has just eloquently stated the negative impact of climate change. He's just indicated that this is not a distant threat. It is already here with us. The example he gave about the storms that disrupted the container ship traffic in the port of Cape Town is just one of the instances that reminds us that climate change is real. His Excellency also reminded us that climate change is not just an environmental issue. It is an economic issue that affects diverse sectors and communities. It is also a social issue. The President has correctly stated that the poor are the most negatively affected by the devastating impact of climate change, including climate change-induced floods. And I've witnessed this. During the recent general elections, I was doing the campaign, persuading people to vote for the ANC. In KZN, don't ask me what actually happened. It's another conversation for another day. But I met Mam Kize. And I'm saying Mam Kize is not a real name because I have no consent from her to talk about her experience in platforms like this. I met Mam Kize and her displaced children at a township called Umlazi. Mam Kize lost everything to the floods. Her house was gone. Her dignity was also gone. Mam Kize also told me how the displaced children were frequently abused as she lived like a vagabond, moving from one place to another without a house. The South African government is committed, as President Cyril Ramaphosa has said, to transitioning South Africa to a low carbon and climate resilient economy. But this, as the President has said, has to be just. Workers and communities must not be left behind. It should prioritize energy independence and security of supply. It should ensure that developing countries have control over their energy resources. It should also ensure access to reliable and affordable power. The decarbonization of our economy presents a unique opportunity for industrialization of our continent. By embracing green technologies and sustainable practices, new industries and job opportunities can be created, particularly in the renewable energy sector. Africa is not only endowed with the sun, a critical source for solar energy, Africa is also endowed with critical minerals for decarbonization. Mining and adding value to boost the industrialization of the African continent require concrete action beyond talk. The National Treasury's role is critical in this journey. As a fiscal authority, the National Treasury has taxing, borrowing, and funding allocation, which can fundamentally influence and contribute building low carbon and climate resilient economy. The South African government is introducing an investment allowance starting March 1st, 2026 to boost local electric vehicle production. In terms of this allowance, the producers can claim 15% of qualifying investment spending on production capacity for electric and hydrogen-powered vehicles in the first year. By leveraging public finances, the government can de-risk private investment and mobilize resources for climate and just energy transition, ensuring a resilient and prosperous future for all South Africans. The objectives of this summit are to strengthen and clarify the National Treasury's contribution to climate response, to mobilize content and stimulate discussions on the decarbonization of the topics related to this subject. This symposium is also aimed at framing priority actions for the National Treasury in order to enhance our policy influence and advocacy. We also seek to contribute towards the development of a comprehensive green growth strategy. We'll also want to share with you key activities that were undertaken as National Treasury related to low carbon and climate resilient economy. This symposium is a platform for dialogue, for sharing knowledge, collaboration, in order to allow for an integrated and coordinated approaches to tackle climate change. It is for this reason that we've always valued partnerships with esteemed organizations such as the World Bank, UNECA, Presidential Climate Commission, the European Union, the South African Towards Inclusive Economic Development, SITIDE for short, as essential for ensuring inclusive, resilient, and sustainable efforts. As National Treasury, we seek to use this symposium to gather inputs on how this work can be enhanced. And as the President said, he sees wisdom in all your eyes, even those ones who are thinking wise, their eyes are closed. They can see wisdom. The economic and fiscal context on the African continent, including South Africa, is a challenging one. It is estimated that African countries need trillions of US dollars to finance investment in agriculture, energy, water, and transport to build decarbonized and climate resilient economies. High debt levels and increasing debt service costs limit our Africa countries' fiscal space, hindering our capacity to invest in critical areas needed for building climate resilient economies. The South African budget 2024 aims to support higher public and private investment while stabilizing debt and reducing fiscal risks. Debt service costs consume a larger share of taxpayer resources. It is for this reason that the recent South African national budgets have been seeking to reduce our debt so that we can also reduce the debt service costs. This will enable us to allocate more resources towards climate action initiative without compromising other essential services such as providing housing safety to Mamkhize and the children in KZN. The South African government is prioritizing capital budgets with a 7.3% increase in capital investment over the medium term to support projects that enhance climate resilience. Debt stabilization also enhances investor confidence, making South Africa a more attractive destination for green investments. Maintaining a stable and predictable fiscal environment encourages private sector participation in climate resilient efforts. His Excellency President Ramaphosa has called upon us to find innovative financing models to crowd in the private sector investment towards supporting climate action. As a national treasury, we are working on various strategies, including private-public participation and new institutional arrangements to mobilize financial resources for sustainable development. These models will enable us to attract private sector investment, leveraging public funds to achieve greater impact. The Minister of Finance will outline the details of these funding mechanisms during the medium-term budget policy statement around October. And this symposium should provide inputs and suggestions on how we can have different models that will enable us to attract private sector investment in order to build a decarbonized and resilient, climate resilient economy. Domestic resource mobilization will require the capacity of African countries to combat illicit financial flows. Africa is losing to a lot of money to abusive transfer pricing, trade mispricing and misinvoicing, tax evasion and avoidance. And this symphony of domestic resources from the continent disables Africa's ability to mobilize its own financial resources to build decarbonized and climate resilient economies. In this speech today, His Excellency President Ramaphosa appreciated the positive steps with the establishment of the Green Climate Fund and the Loss and Damage Fund and other global mechanisms. Loss and Damage Fund is a critical lifeline for developing countries facing the brunt of climate change's devastating consequences. These countries contribute less to carbon emission, yet they are disproportionately affected by extreme weather events like floods, droughts, and the rise in sea levels. The Loss and Damage Fund offers financial support for rebuilding infrastructure, resettling communities displaced by climate change, and developing infrastructure that is more resistant to climate impacts. Without this support, people like Mamkize in Umlazi in KZN will continue to shoulder the burden of climate change and get pushed deeper into poverty. Traditional solutions like debt or constitutional fund denominated in foreign currency come with significant risks. Currency fluctuations can significantly increase the repayment burden for developing countries. A sudden depreciation in their currencies could make it harder to service loans denominated in a stronger currency like the US dollar. It is thus imperative that climate finance facilities are either denominated in local currency or, if provided in foreign currency, that they should be deeply concessional, that is with lower interest rates, and provide for grace period, that is longer period in capital repayment. Additionally, the financing should be aligned with the country's specific needs and priority areas, not hinder their ability to address climate change challenges through imposing difficult conditionalities. The Loss and Damage Fund aims to address these concerns by providing grants or low-interest loans specifically designed to address climate-related losses and damages. Distinguished guests and delegates, as I conclude, I wish to draw your attention to the main theme of this symposium, which is moving the needle on climate change and just transition and the role of national treasury. This theme underscores the crucial role that the finance ministry can play in advancing climate action. This is essential for achieving the goals of the Paris Agreement and fostering sustainable, inclusive, and resilient growth. I commend the Symposium Planning Committee for their hard work, and I know some of you have not been sleeping, waking up at night thinking that the symposium has started. I also extend gratitude on behalf of the Finance Minister, Enoch Odongwan, to the various cabinet colleagues who have graced and supported this event. To the delegates, I wish you productive deliberations over the course of the 3 days. We encourage continued dialogue and action beyond the symposium. The success of this symposium must be measured by the changed living conditions of Mankizes of this world and their children. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much to you, Deputy Minister. If you'd like to make your way off stage to be a little bit more comfortable, you're more than welcome to do that as we proceed. Fantastic. You like him here? Shall we keep him here for the rest of the day? Thank you so much, Deputy Minister. Thank you. We'll now move on to some messages of support. I know that we're running a little bit behind time, about 10 to 15 minutes. Don't worry. I know for catching up time somewhere, somehow. But I please ask all the speakers to stay within their time allocated so that we don't run too behind schedule. Because a little bit later today, we will be also attending a cocktail event We want to make sure that all of you are ready and in time for that. Now, all our speakers have incredible bios, but in order to keep up time, I'm going to ask that you rather engage with them on their social media pages and also research them. All of them are, it's not an official word, Googleable. So just for the interest and of time, I'm going to introduce them by name and title so that we can move swiftly along. Now I'm looking at my next speaker, and I love this part of my job is trying to learn how to pronounce, names and surnames correctly. I think names and surnames are of such importance. I mean, they're given to you by your family. So please bear with me. I've been practicing. For the first word message of support, we're going to introduce on stage Ms. Satu Kenkunen, Country Director of the World Bank, and then we will call World Bank Group, and also the United States Ambassador to South Africa. Of course, we have His Excellency Mr. R.E., that's Ruben Brigati II. Please make clap your hands as they bring to stage.
Thank you very much. You did a very good job there. Pronouncing my last name. My first name is easy. But President of the Republic of South Africa, His Excellency Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, Honorable Ministers and Deputy Ministers, members of the Diplomatic Corps, esteemed guests, all protocols observed. Good morning to everybody. I'm delighted to be here this morning. And on behalf of the World Bank Group, I'm pleased to extend our support for South Africa's leadership and commitment to address climate change. Climate change is the defining challenge of our times. Every day we are witnessing its local and global impacts. And we know that the climate change does not recognize geographic borders. No country, no people are immune to its effects. By 2050, climate change may push more than 200 million people to live within their countries. And in the next 10 years, it may force more than 130 million people globally into poverty. These are very big numbers. It could cut crop yields and intensify the frequency and severity of climate events. Climate change threatens also South Africa's economy. Extreme weather events damage infrastructure, disrupt water-free and agriculture, and harm public health, as we heard the Honorable President telling us this morning. And these activities are disproportionately felt by the most vulnerable people, such as smallholder farmers and township dwellers. Addressing climate change is thus essential to protect people's lives. The good news is that South Africa is taking action. South Africa has some of the leading global climate scientists. South Africa was also the first country on the African continent to adopt the carbon price. It has adapted just transition framework, amended electricity regulations, and is working in a climate change bill. This work is not easy, but this work is necessary, and much more is needed. The World Bank published 2 years ago the South Africa Country Climate Development Report. That report examines how climate change is expected to impact South Africa's economic development. Let me highlight 3 key messages from that report. The first message is that South Africa can build a prosperous economy and grow while also responding to climate change. These 2 things are not mutually exclusive. But this depends on the extended shifts from coal to low carbon fuels and addresses risks from rising temperatures. The second message is that low carbon transition must be people-centered. It must create jobs and protect the poorest. The third message is that South Africa can accelerate growth, address climate change, and protect its people through a so-called triple transition. A transition that is low carbon, climate resilient, and just. Let me explain. First, a transition to low carbon would help maintain South Africa's global competitiveness, as global financing of fossil fuels is very rapidly closing and already closed in some parts of the world. Such a transition would require leveraging South Africa's potentials, one of the best solar radiation on the planet, and the green minerals the country possesses. Such a transition would result in reduced air, water, and soil pollution, and thus reduce premature deaths. Second, the transition needs to be climate resilient. What does it mean? It means mitigating the impacts of climate change on agriculture, cities, infrastructure, and people through investments. For example, in climate-smart agriculture, sustainable land management, and a robust disaster management system. Thirdly, achieving resilient low-carbon shift only matters if it's done in a just way, protecting the people along the transition. Now, without this kind of a triple transition, climate change could drive almost 1 million South Africans into poverty by 2030, according to the estimates in the report. But the good news is that at the same time, for each job eliminated in the transition, 2 to 3 new jobs could be created by 2050. However, since these new jobs will not necessarily emerge immediately or in the same sectors or locations, public-private interventions will be necessary to equip people with new skills, to facilitate labor movements, and to provide social safety nets. The cost of this transition is going to be high. It will be at least $500 billion by 2050, of which $140 billion is needed by 2030. Therefore, financing from the international community and mobilization of private capital will be vital. Government will not be able to finance this one. The World Bank is ready to assist South Africa in this transition, both with technical assistance and with financing. We are proud to already support South Africa with its energy transition. This includes the restructuring of the power sector, the commissioning of the first coal-fired power plant, investments in renewable energy and storage, and just aspects of the transition. But we are ready to do much more, both financially and technically. I look forward to the discussions in this symposium, and I applaud the National Treasury's leadership in addressing climate change and arranging this symposium. And last, I want to encourage all of us in this room to commit to actions that help South Africa to reach its climate goals. Let's say that. Thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. In absentia to His Excellency the President of the Republic of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, gathered ministers and deputy ministers, my colleagues of the diplomatic corps, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Before I begin my prepared remarks, I would like to take a moment to publicly and personally thank President Ramaphosa for his expressions of support and concern following the July 13th attempted assassination against former United States President Donald Trump. And I thank as well those many South Africans, as well as my colleagues in the diplomatic corps who have also shared their words of comfort and solidarity. As President Biden said in an address to the nation from the Oval Office last night, this kind of violence has no place in America. This kind of violence, or any kind of violence, ever, period. And the United States remains grateful for its strong and enduring partnership with the government and the people of the Republic of South Africa. It is an honor to be here this morning at this Climate Resilience Symposium, addressing one of the defining challenges of our time. Allow me to congratulate the South African government once again on the successful elections and the formation of the historic government of national unity. This achievement highlights the strength and resilience of South African democracy, serving as an inspiration and an example to us all. Together with the government of the Republic of South Africa, the United States of America is committed to deepening our cooperation, to expanding economic prosperity, to combating the climate crisis, and to ensure that democracy truly delivers for its people. I eagerly anticipate our collaborative efforts toward a more peaceful and prosperous future for both of our nations. Climate change stands as the greatest long-term challenge that collectively we all face, exacerbating water and food insecurity while also reducing poverty. It is essential for nations to accelerate their efforts to combat this crisis now. The United States is committed to partnering globally to address climate impacts and to champion a just transition to a low-carbon economy that fosters economic prosperity for all. A key focus is collaborating on energy challenges through a transition to renewable sources. Through the Just Energy Transition Partnership, we are mobilizing significant financial resources to support South Africa's progress from coal to renewable energy, ensuring that this transition is both just and inclusive. This partnership addresses the social and economic impacts of energy transition and helps South Africa meet its nationally determined contributions under the Paris Agreement. For our part, the United States contribution to the Just Energy Transition Partnership includes $1 billion that will not add a single cent to the sovereign debt of the Republic of South Africa. It is $1 billion that is pledged in the form of loan guarantees to private sector actors to take on projects to support the just energy transition. And this $1 billion in loan guarantees is ready for deployment today, pending only the identification of partnerships and projects jointly determined with the government of South Africa and approved for this purpose. I should further add that this $1 billion is not meant simply to fund the projects that are jointly identified, but also to incentivize and to catalyze further private sector investment in this space, as called for by President Ramaphosa in his remarks earlier this morning. We understand that the path to decarbonization is complex and comes with significant challenges. The economic and social costs of transitioning away from coal are indeed substantial. The transition is a chance to build a more resilient, more just, more inclusive, and more diversified economy that leverages South Africa's abundant renewable energy resources and that creates new economic opportunities while protecting vulnerable communities and reducing pollution in this beautiful country. In conclusion, this symposium this week is a chance for us all to recognize that the path to a sustainable future is not just an obligation, but an opportunity. An opportunity for innovation, for continued collaboration, and for shared prosperity. South Africa's leadership in this transition is vital, not only for the nation, but for the Southern African region and for the continent at large. As partners, we can address the climate crisis together, uplifting communities and forging a brighter, more resilient future for all. Thank you very much.
If I could please request that all speakers after this speak from this podium and not the President's podium, we will be pulling it off shortly. So if you could all please come to this podium, that would be great. It's okay. We are going to swap things around a little bit in the program because we're pressed for time. We do have a time constraint for one of our speakers who needs to be elsewhere. So I haven't missed a speaker, don't worry. I'm just swapping things around a little bit to accommodate those that I need to accommodate. So please help me welcome to stage Dr. Francois Engelbrecht, Global
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, President Manager. I will attempt to address all the formal dignitaries as the Deputy Minister did. That's beyond my expertise as the climate scientist. But let me say, ladies and gentlemen, that it's a great privilege for a climate scientist to speak at a meeting opened by the President of your country. It's wonderful to address a number of ministers and deputy ministers, ambassadors, high commissioners, directors from key financial institutes. It has always been clear to me since I started my career in the climate science system that in South Africa, government does listen to climate scientists. And frequently they have the opportunity to engage with decision makers at the highest level. So in South Africa, and this is a privilege that doesn't exist in all countries. There is a path for climate science to find out in policy. So in this context, also I acknowledge today that the presence of colleagues from the Department of Forestry, Fisheries and Environment, Research and Climate Commission, and National Treasury, key three entities for whom we as the climate scientists engage in the country. Thank you so much for the invitation to make this presentation today. My task, everyone, is to provide an update of what we've been hearing about this morning, climate change and its impacts in South Africa. Let me take you through an overview of what we may expect in this part of the world as we move deeper into a warmer world. First, I have to point out news that is not good news. The world has now, for the first time, exceeded the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold of global warming. In fact, the period June last year to May this year is the warmest 12-month period ever measured by humans. The measurements go back to 1850. That was a staggering 1.63 degrees Celsius above the industrial temperature. What it means is that a new era in climate is dawning, the era of 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming. The Paris Agreement on climate change tried to prevent this, as I think everyone in this audience will know. The Paris Agreement tried to keep global warming to well below 2 degrees Celsius, preferably below 1.5 degrees Celsius. And already back in 2021, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, acknowledged that it's more likely than not that we can no longer stay below 1.5 degrees Celsius of global warming. So now we see the first 12-month periods exceeding that threshold, and it is now, I would say, likely that climate on the average will exceed that threshold permanently. The best estimate the IPCC has available for this is the early 2030s, permanent exceedance of the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold of global warming. So what does it mean for us in Africa and in Southern Africa? A 1.5 degrees Celsius world, the IPCC assessed back in 2018, is a more dangerous world for us to live in. Let us just examine briefly what has been happening during this time that we've exceeded the threshold for the first time globally. We've just lived through a devastating drought in Southern Africa. It was bad in South Africa, but it was worse in northern Botswana, into Zambia, northern Namibia, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. Zimbabwe, Malawi, and Zambia have all declared national states of disaster in March and April this year. So that map on the left-hand side, you can see that rainfall anomalies was about 40% on the negative side. So 40% less rainfall than normal in the summer half year. And huge impact on the landscape. So if you look there, there's satellite images around the Zambezi River. Much depleted vegetation right now compared to a year ago. And we've had tens of thousands of cattle die-offs, huge impacts on the wildlife in the South African countries. But is the drought the result of climate change? I'll get to it. Let me just mention that it is also the crops. The maize crop has been much substantially lower this year compared to previous years in Southern Africa. And really heartbreaking scenery in the region. For example, in the Okavango River, hippopotamus getting stuck in the mud and dying. This was the reality of drought past season. I've just had the privilege of visiting some of these regions.